Hello, everyone. Welcome back to TMI Talk with Dr. Mary. I'm your host, Dr. Mary. In this episode, I brought in Gabrielle Mullinix, and she is a trailblazing scalp therapist, holistic head spa educator, and founder of GEMPIRE Head SPA in Austin, Texas. We'll dive a little bit more into her in just a minute, but I wanted to back up and explain a little bit about Gabrielle and I's history. She had been my hairdresser for several years, and I had found out that I was diagnosed with cancer, and she helped me navigate losing my hair, getting a wig, going through my first haircuts, and understanding my new hair again. And it was such a pivotal part of both of our careers because I woke up to wanting to be more holistic in my path and my journey of health. And it was an eye-opening experience for her as well. And she was already on this path of holistic hair care, but it really drove that direction for her. And she's very special and near and dear to my heart because losing your hair during cancer treatment is one of the most uncomfortable things that a lot of people don't really talk about that process. So much of the focus is on keeping somebody alive, which is, yes, that's important, but there's also that piece. And so diving in more to about Gabrielle, so she owns GEMPIRE Head SPA, a soulful brand dismantling the toxic norms of the beauty industry from the inside out. With over 15 years of experience behind the chair, Gabrielle transformed her own health collapse in a mission-driven movement, guiding both clients and professionals towards a sustainable, spiritual, and science-backed approach to scalp and nervous system care. Based in Austin, Texas, Gabrielle blends ancient wisdom, nervous system regulation, and non-toxic tools to create a deep, nourishing head spa experience. Her online education platform empowers sensitive stylists, estheticians, and wellness practitioners with the techniques and rituals and marketing tools to build peaceful, profitable careers that don't compromise their health. And so in this episode, what you'll learn are the overall arching theme is the hidden cost of conventional beauty and everything that we do to get to that and how it affects our bodies. So what we'll dive into is how chronic exposure to chemicals in beauty and healthcare settings can actually contribute to illness, the real story behind cancer hair loss, and how the overpriced wig industry doesn't actually mean quality, and how many people that are going through cancer treatment are actually being scammed by this and paying thousands of dollars. How greenwashing is evident in our hair products and in the beauty industry, calling it vegan or clean when it doesn't always mean that it's safe. Why the nervous system needs time to reset after leaving toxic environments. This can include chemicals or even just a toxic work environment in general. How scalp health connects to fascia, blood flow, and even your nervous system. Daily things that you can do to support healthy hair growth by focusing on your scalp, and why slowing down and reconnecting with your body is a non-negotiable if you want to heal. So without further ado, we will jump into the episode, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome back to TMI Talk with Dr. Mary, where we dive into non-traditional forms of health that were once labeled as taboo or dismissed as woo. I'm your host, Dr. Mary. I'm an orthopedic and pelvic floor physical therapist who helps health, movement, and rehab professionals integrate whole body healing by blending the nervous system into traditional biomechanics to maximize patient outcomes. I use a non-traditional approach that has helped thousands of people address the deeper roots of health that often get overlooked in conventional Western training. And now we're going to be starting our next episode. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really so excited you're here.
Yes, me too.
It's a long time coming.
Yes.
I'm excited to dive into all of the things today that you and I have been on this mutual journey of branching out on our own and leaving kind of toxic work environments and then going more of this holistic approach, all while being on our own spiritual journeys
Yes.
and seeing what aligns with both of us. And I'd love to dive into all that with you.
I'm into it. And
Yeah.
I'm very excited to be here. And I just think the alignment of our paths in general as they've gone like this, a lot of the times we've been able to just like kind of come back together and realize that we're really like this, you know what I mean, in a lot of ways. So
Totally.
Like,
Well, you want to explain to everybody how we know each other?
yeah. So you were a beautiful client of mine when I was in a hair salon. I believe you came in on a Groupon.
It's a Groupon. I think it was like a Yelp special, actually.
So we started our journey there. I have been now a hairstylist of 15 years, but when we met, probably 10 I don't know, it's been about 10 years that we've known each
Like
other about.
2015,
hmm
about, yeah.
hmm So, I just moved to Austin and, was building up my clientele again. And I really feel like a lot of those of you that have been with me since the beginning has been like, again, very much so synchronistic and in alignment for just the paths that we've walked in our own just like healing journeys. But yeah, I got to service your beautiful hair, do all kinds of color experiences, and I think that was probably 5 years in that salon environment, and then ultimately transitioned into my own solo space because of the industry starting to kind of take me out as far as my health goes. So I started seeing things happen in the industry that were sort of not resonating with my body, and I think that's where, you walked your path as well. And it was very similar to the timeline that I was walking my path, but silently, because I couldn't necessarily speak to toxins in the hair environment. There was not a lot of people talking about these things at the time. It was really scary to say these things that, my health could be reflective of what I'm using and what I'm using on people and how I'm affecting people or how I'm affecting myself on a daily basis. So I remember there was just a really big shift in, having chronic migraines and not being able to breathe in that space and all of those things that just started coming to a head that I was like, I really need to explore something else and I need to be able to um, honor a space that feels more healing. And nobody was really talking about the holistic side of the hair industry yet.
No, no.
Nobody would have ever heard of that. I really had to dig for these things myself. And that was in 2019. So it was really me just starting to like explore options, because it became really scary for me that, with my past history of being, my like dad's side of things, my mom's side of things, there's a lot of cancer that is underlying on both sides. And for me to start exploring all of the ingredients in the things that I was using and being in an environment that housed multiple keratins a day, which I found out to be a huge carcinogen because they have formaldehyde. Um, and connecting some of my health path to that specifically, that particular service, I was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? And it became really, really illuminating, but also I was kind of silently suffering at the time.
Well, I think it's hard when you're coming out in an industry that nobody's talking about this. I mean, it was 2019. Now you're seeing more stuff rise up, especially post-COVID and all the
Totally.
things, and people like yourself starting to get the courage to speak out because it can be scary. I mean, me talking about spirituality as a physical therapist that's mainly Western trained, it has taken a lot of nervous system work for me to be able to handle criticism, but I am willing to take it because I feel so passionately about when our souls are off path, a lot of health issues can happen, and not blaming the health issues on the person, but
Right.
how can we look at these chronic health issues as messages?
Yeah.
Messages like, hey, am I in the wrong environment?
Totally.
What in my immediate environment, in my current ecosystem, is causing this sickness? Is it environment? Is it diet? I mean, most of the time, I feel like we put a lot on diet, and I still think there's a lot in diet too, a lot. But if we're not addressing the constant exposure that we have, like the chemicals, I think about this with nail salons too. I know I see people wearing masks now to help with that. I'm excited that they're doing that, but you're getting a lot of people like yourself, the trailblazers um, in these different professions that have just kind of left things silent and just pretend like nothing's happening. But the reality is there's a lot of chemicals in these products. And I remember even just back in 2018 talking about how, yeah, I don't put certain sunscreen on my body because I don't trust these bigger companies because they're giving Europe different products and they're giving
Yes.
us because it's cheaper. And it's like you're poisoning the US people, the people of the United States. And I remember like getting shit for that.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, well, now it's more accepted. But
Mhm.
it was like, oh, okay, you're
Yeah.
exaggerating. And I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
am I? Because I'm dealing with chronic fatigue for 20 years.
Mhm.
Little did I know it was multiple things that
Totally.
were going on, but a heightened nervous system my whole life.
Mhm.
I mean, I can eat healthy all damn day, but it's
Mhm.
like when I was diagnosed with cancer, I was eating gluten-free, I was
Yeah.
having turmeric smoothies, I was exercising, but I was in a relationship that was not good. I was in it wasn't a good fit, and then, like, I was having a lot of issues with my family at the time and processing a lot of Catholic guilt and
Yes.
internalizing a lot of stuff, not knowing how my energy is being affected too.
Mhm.
Like, I was overgiving my energy, and I didn't realize how much just sacred power that is.
Totally.
Just absorbing everybody else's energy and going out of my way to help people that I barely even knew, which is not a bad thing to do, but it's like I was always doing that.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember when I was married at the time, like, my partner was like, "Why do you give your energy to everybody else and not, to me?" Or, like,
Mhm.
and it just made me think, like, "Oh, okay."
Mhm.
And then, I reflect now, and there's just so many different aspects about it that, yeah, I was overgiving and not giving to the people that were closest to me.
Oh, totally.
Um,
Yeah. I
but
think even in the industry, like you speaking to that bridge of 2020 and the illuminations that were coming out of that, there was a lot of scary stuff happening. But at the same time, too, I just remember being in that space. I just transitioned into my new studio and the conversation of if you're going to go back to work, this is how it has to look. And, we have basically a full hazmat suit on, right? And then when I thought about it, I was like, isn't this how we should be dressed anyways if we're dealing with the chemicals
oh,
we are? Like,
I just got
ultimately,
chills.
yeah, ultimately, we are really the only service providers that aren't protected in that way with the level of exposure that we have to ammonia, to benzene, to all these carcinogens that are just floating around as vapors in the air. You know what I mean? Just our aerosols, all of that. You know what I mean? So I just remember like thinking, okay, we need to go back housed in this hazmat suit. Why have I not been doing that the entire time then? You
Because it
know?
wasn't
Right.
normalized.
Right. And I can give you a specific example of that too. There was a time when I was doing, um, one of my coworkers was doing a keratin. This was after I'd already kind of found
Is
out, like,
keratin the straightening stuff? Okay.
yeah. So ultimately, it helps smooth the hair, all of those things. When you hit any sort of heat to that particular product, the vapors become formaldehyde.
Ooh.
So it's gas in the air. And you have to have a very particular system in order to suck that stuff out, right? We had a small salon, but I do not believe that we had that system if I was being affected the way that I was. Anyways, I had worked it out with the owners of the salon that I was not going to be doing those particular processes anymore. However, I was still going to be in the environment. And so I asked, would it be okay while somebody else is literally in a gas mask giving these experiences? Can I wear a mask myself? Because I already know how I feel, right? Like I already know that my throat starts closing up. I start getting this like tingling down the back of my neck where everything just starts getting like really almost like I can't hear, you know what I mean? And then it would become just immediately a migraine, like all of a sudden, right? And as I asked for that permission, they were like, no, because we don't want anybody to think anything's wrong. I'm like, somebody's already wearing a gas mask.
Is the client wearing a mask?
The client receiving the experience is wearing a mask. The service provider is in a gas mask, and anybody
Why
else
are we
like
doing
I
this?
know. And then by the time those services were done, we were in a literal cloud. Like it's like we had to open the doors, all of these things, and I just was like, this is so terrible. But like again,
It's
I'm
so normalized
yeah.
that, like, you just when you're, you know, there's like little things too that I would even think about when I was at corporate. Is I was
Mm-hmm.
like, we were touching cavicide
Mm-hmm.
without gloves
Mm-hmm.
and cavicide into your bloodstream, and
Yeah.
I'd get made fun of because I'd wear like gloves, or I was like, no, like, let's get more natural, like EPA approved
Mm-hmm.
products. We don't need to be exposing ourselves to this. And it was, oh, you're just exaggerating. I'm like, no, we're literally spraying like cavicide, inhaling it every 30 minutes as we're cleaning off the table. It's
Right.
not just this one-time exposure. It's
Right.
like the
Microdosing.
repeated exposure. And I was like, no, I'm not spraying that anymore. I'm not inhaling that. And
Mhm.
it's not necessary. Like, that's necessary if blood is on a surface.
Totally.
Nobody's having blood on the surface. Like,
Mhm.
we use those wipes. I don't
Mhm.
use the spray. We use the wipes after somebody has a pelvic floor assessment
Totally.
because sometimes
Yeah.
the vagina juices get on the dick. Like,
Yeah, that's real.
or like pee or
Yeah.
something like that. They'll get on the pad, but you still want to
Yes.
or lube or something like that.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that it's cleaned up, but we need to be discerning about the things that we expose ourselves to. Even
Yeah.
like the lotions that we use
Yep.
as physical therapists, like, we use just like some cocoa butter,
Mhm.
but some of these other ones, it's the repeated exposure from a clinician or practitioner
Totally.
standpoint.
Yeah. I literally
Um,
say it feels like we're always microdosing. And at
yeah,
that point, I felt like I was macrodosing chemicals. You know what I mean?
totally.
Because of the way that it was like, I physically couldn't go in there and not be affected in
Mhm.
some way. Whether it was like, just the hair color that was going on. Again, there's ammonia in those products. And yes, there's other products that have an ammonia derivative or whatever the case may be, but those are not, they're not tested as in long term yet. You know what I mean? We're in the midst of using them right now. So I'm like interested to see in the future, was that the same? You know what I mean? Was our ammonia exposure and this more holistic color, did they end up kind of balancing the scales and it ended up being the same because it was just another chemical or another thing, right? Or compound that we ended up using. But again, I speak to just like our skin is our biggest organ. We have to be so careful about what it is. If you are not touching it, it is still in your environment that it can literally absorb into your skin, which is why I talk so heavy on vapors, because as soon as you're blow drying, guess what? You've got products that you've put in the hair. You've got chemicals that are still sitting on the hair if they received any sort of chemical service. We are now releasing those into the air as vapors and inhaling them, because what is a hairstylist doing most of the time? Talking over the blow dryer. So they are eating all of that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And it's just one of those things where I was like, yeah, no wonder my throat felt the way that it did.
of
You know what I
course.
mean?
Well, it makes me think too, it's like in Western medicine, when people are coming in and chronically sick, it's like we're not talking like if you're bleaching your hair regularly,
Mm-hmm.
like how are you feeling after your
Mm-hmm.
bleachings? And
Yeah.
and that's something I never put. I was dyeing my hair, and then you question yourself, you're like, why am I dyeing my hair?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
Mm-hmm.
like I was dyeing my hair ever since I was 15. And
Same.
then subconsciously I was like, why am I dyeing it?
Mm-hmm.
What about it? And it was so silly, but it was I was trying to look like, and it never worked because I never fit into the conventional beauty category, which was
Right.
like the hot blonde, big boob, super skinny
Right.
waist, but like
Yeah.
this impossible body
Mm-hmm.
that we were all comparing ourselves to, like the Victoria's Secret models, which we know
Totally.
all of that's been
Yeah.
exposed.
Right.
And they weren't feeling well during those experiences, and their bodies
Yeah.
like weren't optimal. And you hear all of this like corruption, and it's like you really sit back and think about it, and it's people prying on our insecurities. The beauty industry
Mm-hmm.
just does that.
Mm-hmm.
And I see dermat uh dermatology practices here
Mm-hmm.
in Austin that have billboards with the,
Mm-hmm.
the conventional
Mm-hmm.
beauty
Mm-hmm.
bullshit. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, why are we? It's
Still,
2025
still, yeah. Yeah.
and we're still posting that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's funny because when you really pull it back, it's like, well, that's the best way to keep women small.
Yeah.
Get them so obsessed with the way that they look
Mm-hmm.
that they don't question anything because they're too busy wrapped up in looking skinny, looking a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
dyeing their hair, like
Mm-hmm.
all these things. And hey, if people want to dye their hair and
Yeah.
they've weighed all their pros and cons and
Yep.
it's something they enjoy, awesome.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's making this, it's like this discernment and discernment is just such a key in this world today, is
Mm-hmm.
sitting with this and being like, is this something that I'm doing for myself? Do
Mm-hmm.
I really like this? Or is there a deeper rooted thing?
Mm-hmm.
Because I still find it crazy that we try to hide our grays too. And
Our
who
split
knows?
ends.
I might do that as
Mm-hmm.
mine gets more gray.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, I fully want to embrace it with platinum, but I
Yeah.
might change my mind. I might still
Right.
want to dye my hair. But
Yeah.
it's just sad to me because as women, we're just constantly like being told subconsciously that we're not enough, we're not doing enough. And, all of the ads for Botox and plastic
Mm-hmm.
surgery, and
Mm-hmm.
it's all to women. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
we're from a binary sense, it's really all to women. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I feel like once you see it, you can't unsee it anymore.
Totally.
Um, and I just look back to so much of my childhood and just feeling like it was enough because I didn't have big enough boobs. I didn't
Mhm.
look a certain way. It's just
Mhm.
like all this
Mhm.
stuff, and then we just stay small, and then we expose ourselves to chemicals
Oh,
and
yeah. I mean, because the same thing too, I mean, that even triggers something at as one of my clients who is I would say a pretty big deal. You know what I mean? Like she runs multiple, we'll say like waxing studios. Um, and I don't necessarily want to put a name to that, but I remember coming in after I was going through my skin journey because again, like through my skin, I have struggled for years because I was constantly fighting acne,
Mhm.
scarring, all of this stuff, and inflammation just in general. I felt it in my body, but mostly through my face, right? And a lot of times it was like, okay, well, what am I eating? What is this? What is that? Well, I remember going through this process. I just started going to an esthetician for the very first time. She was explaining that certain things that I might be eating, like dairy, could be very inflammatory and all of that. And so I was like, okay, I'll cut that back. That immediately made a huge change for me, which was wonderful. But I went through the path of getting chemical peels done because I wanted to minimize my scarring. I wanted to be able to, get in there and just like soothe the skin over time, right? And this particular client came in and, I felt the need because I wasn't wearing makeup that day, and I was just healing from this freaking chemical peel that, yes, makes you peel. I was already not feeling great, you know what I mean? But I was like, you know what? We're going to own it. This is my skin,
Mhm.
you know? And so I told this client, I was like, hey, feel like I just need to give you a heads up coming off of a chemical peel, this, that, or the other. I'm trying to heal these things. She was like, you know what? I was going to ask because you don't look very professional today. And I was like, oh, why do you say that? And she goes, if you were one of my girls working for me, I would have sent you home. Where's your full face of makeup? You don't look put together. And I was like, and I had to just kind of like, because again, that is one of my deepest insecurities, right? And I'm just outwardly sharing to say, hey, this is what I'm doing for myself. I was actually excited to go on the process, but to be met with something like
Ew.
that, you don't look the part now. You know what I mean? For you to be in your natural skin, you don't look the part. And I had to I was with her for 3 hours after that. And I had
Ugh.
to hold it and be like, you know what? It's okay. Like, it's sticks and stones. But it was just one of those faults. Well, they're a stick right now. I know. I was like, it just made me reflect so much when I got home because I had to sit with myself and be like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I love expressing myself through makeup.
Yeah.
I always have, ever since I was a kid. But I wanted to start bridging this new relationship with
Yeah.
myself where I could say, you know what, it would be really nice if I could go out and not have to wear a full face of makeup and feel really good about
I
it.
feel bad for
And
anybody that works for her.
I know.
I mean,
And
that's toxic. That's a toxic
totally.
work environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, coming from a woman too, that was,
Mm.
I just was like, I was like, damn, like that was it was gutting, but at the same time too, like to be able to speak to it, to be able to have also had other clients in my chair, other hairstylists that have been in a similar situation before. Um, I was just like, this is an experience that I'm having, but I don't necessarily have to let it define something about me. I don't have to immediately go back and be like, well, my skin's still healing, but let me throw a full face of makeup on really quick. Like I sat with it and was just like, that is her thing. Like,
Mhm.
that doesn't have to
And that's
define
also
how I
not
continue
even
to
like
show
your
up.
ideal client either.
Yeah,
That's
right,
like
right,
fine.
right.
Night, passing in the night.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's another thing too, is even energetically just thinking about if you have a client that is like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, ooh, okay, well, that's not a personal thing. That's just imagine the way that I look at it when it's people like that. I'm just like, I can't imagine what it'd be like to live in
Mm-hmm.
that brain
Mm-hmm.
where I'm just constantly thinking I need to put a full face of makeup on
Yeah.
to show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's sad.
Mm-hmm.
That's so sad.
Yeah. It was a
And to
very
say that to another woman,
mm-hmm.
and it's just like, ugh.
Yeah. And at the time it was like, I was probably 26 at
Mhm.
the time. You know what I mean? Still coming from a very how do I arrive in this space? I'm 2 years new to Austin. I'm dealing with humidity. It's hot. I'm glistening all the time. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm like, how do we make up here? You know what I mean? Coming from Austin or from Maryland, it was just like,
you can't really wear makeup here. By the way, your skin looks great.
thanks.
You look
We've been
comfy
working on it
outfit.
for like 10 years. Shout out to all my SDs because yeah, literally. It's been a journey, but again, like had I not had that like pivotal also moment of friction because it came up against myself where I was like, you know what? I could go hide back in this shell again, you know what I mean? And that wouldn't feel good. Or I could embrace what she said and take it and just say, okay, but I know I don't want to treat people that way. If I was ever in her point of position, if I ever had people under me, it would be like, express yourself in the way that feels really good for you.
Yeah, because that's healthy.
Yeah, literally.
And it's like, it's funny though, because I think people like that will be
Mhm.
like, we can't find good staff. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a staff issue.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
And that was a revolving door, That was one of those things where I was like,
We can't figure out what I love it when like, gosh, the amount of like bosses I've had over the years or like seeing other businesses that just want to just bitch about staff. And I'm like, are you not looking? If you have a staff issue, it's you.
Yeah.
Either you're hiring wrong or you're a bad leader. And either way, you need to figure out and stop. But people will just keep pushing the button and be like, I can't look inward at all. So it's everybody else's fault.
Right.
And it's funny because it's just like, it's really not that hard. Treat people well and get the people who believe in the same things, your mission and your core values. And yeah, I mean, that's abuse to tell people that they have to look a certain way and like, and send them home if they don't look up to your standards.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but that came from even the very beginning of me getting into the hair industry, too. Like, I remember I'm
sure that's all over the beauty industry.
Yes, because it's like
it's not just
if you aren't looking like you're coming out of some sort of Instagram or Pinterest ad or at the time magazine ad, you know what I mean? And it wasn't that you were polished and had uncomfortable shoes on. There were literal rules in some of the places that I worked that it was like, if you were not in a heeled shoe, you are going home.
Ew.
And we know just how terrible that is on our body.
Well, you're already standing all day on like concrete surfaces too. No, I think that it's crazy. I mean, these industries, and I mean, it's similar to like in healthcare too. Like if you like, I probably don't even know if I could have a nose ring if I worked at corporate. I'm not really sure.
Right.
People would have to hide their tattoos on their arms, and it's like that's a form of self-expression, you know? I mean, it's just it's the reason we need more people going on their own or joining teams that are supportive. Because ultimately what we're seeing is like the old world dying right now, all that bullshit. Like all of like, you have to look a certain way, dress a certain way, and all this stuff. Yes, there's a piece of looking professional, right? Like I'm not going to come in pajamas.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if I want to wear like baggy jeans and like a shirt that looks like, something like this, I mean, it's just there's a balance, I think. And but I think you're seeing so many people shift in the way that they show up. Like there was a study done, I'm blanking on who it was through, but basically the top reason people left their work was due to culture issues. And I have stayed at places much longer than I should have because of the culture in that clinic, not the whole business.
Right.
None of the whole businesses that I've ever worked for I've ever been fond of.
Right.
There's toxicity in corporate everywhere. In the ones that I've been involved with, I haven't seen that. And it's just the more that we start questioning and evolving, and we don't just blindly just take. People say like, oh, I work for corporate so I can get a paycheck. I'm like, yeah, but you can get fired tomorrow, and then what are you going to do? You don't have a backup.
Right.
You don't have a backup, and then it's a trade-off because it's like your energy is now entitled to somebody that literally doesn't care about you. Like corporate will let you go in a heartbeat, and nobody cares because it is what it is, because they can just say, oh, it's business. But well, let's dive into our story a little bit, because I think when did I go? I went out on my own, 2018? And I think you were 2019, right?
2020.
Or 2020?
It was technically the midst of the pandemic. It was like just shy.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
it
I
was
do
a month
remember going to your
before, yeah.
place when we were like all masked up.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so you were such a foundational part of my journey as well. And for people listening, I had lost my hair and I had this long, beautiful, I mean, you always made my hair look so good. I mean, I got compliments on it all the time. And it was such, I just identified so much with my hair. And then when cancer hit, like, you don't realize how much you identify with your hair until it's gone. And when it was gone, I mean, I lost like 80% of it and then just shaved it. I was like, I
Right.
can't.
Yeah.
Hair was everywhere. I was like, I tried to hang on to it. And I think like the hardest thing was just like, well, what do I do? Like, now that I'm not getting my hair done and I can't style my hair and all this stuff. And then you helped me. You dyed my wig. You wouldn't let me pay for it. And I was like, let me, and I was just navigating so much. And I just still, and you gave me my first haircut for free, I think, after cancer. And it's just like, yeah, like meant a lot. And so, yeah. And so you want to kind of dive into.
Yeah. I have witnessed so many people going through that journey. And you weren't the first person that I had worked with in that way. There was a number of people that had sort of started that path that I was, invited to either shave their head for them or, maybe we closed down the salon early so that we could have like an intimate moment and it was just me and that person. When it came to your experience, this was the first time I had ever done any sort of like wig work like that. But I was very confident I could do it because I've worked with extensions forever and coloring hair and all of it. And, as I had had these previous experiences with women that are already going through the toughest fight of their life, it is a like switch of everything. You find this information out, and one of the first things that comes up is like, well, based off what I have, am I going to lose my hair?
Yep. That's the first thing you think of.
And with that experience, there is an industry, like the wig industry or the extensions, whatever it is, that I watched numerous clients of mine coming in, telling me that they got this diagnosis. They were then referred to this company to get a wig or get a this or get a that. And then what did they end up paying? Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for wigs that were no better than going to Party City, that were synthetic, you couldn't even manage them with any kind of heat. So they would come in and I was like, these are women, and I don't even want to just say what this affects everyone, right? But the people primarily that I was working with was women. So to see them not only have now these medical expenses, but one of the first things to come up is, I just want to be able to still connect a little bit with the identity that I had. Is there a way to do that? Yes. Let me give you this referral, but then let me blow your wallet up. You know what I mean? I watched this experience so many times, and, trying to work with synthetic wigs and all of these different things, I just was like, I was like, wherever you're getting your referral, right? We talked about like where you were getting your wigs from and things like that. Because I'd already walked the path, I was like, I at least want to like go through what this synthetic blend is, real hair, raw hair, whatever it is, so that we can make sure that you get something that we can work with. And it doesn't have to be thousands of dollars. So that is just information for anybody that doesn't know it, is that you do not have to spend thousands of dollars in order to get your hands on a wig that could be synthetic and, we'll say like raw hair blend to be able to work with.
I think that's important for clinicians and, movement professionals too to hear, because cancer's a big thing that you can't not know somebody or have a patient that's been affected or currently been affected in healthcare.
Yeah.
With it and navigating the wig industry, you helped me so much. And then me like looking at this and looking at that. I mean, I think my wig was like $700, and then my insurance. So insurance will sometimes pay for it.
Right.
Mine did. It just took forever to get the check. It took
Yeah.
like 3 months or
Mm-hmm.
something insane. But it was, yeah, I wanted a wig because I didn't want my patients feeling bad for me.
Right.
Like if I was in tech or something, I probably would have just said whatever and just
Mhm.
wore a hat all the
Mhm.
time. But there's a different energy that happens. Like when people find out you have cancer, they almost feel bad that you're working.
Yeah.
And so I only let certain clients know if it
Mhm.
affected their treatment. Like I remember after one chemo, I woke up and I like could not get out of bed. I was so dizzy.
Mm.
And I canceled a patient like kind of last minute, and that's not like me. And I had to
Right.
tell her, and she was like, she was a cancer survivor, and she was
Mhm.
like, "Oh my God, I'm so I had no idea."
Yeah.
And so there's also like navigating that when you're in these industries where you're caring for other people and you don't want them energetically worrying about you, but at the same time you're navigating this thing and you don't necessarily want to do it silently, but it's
Right.
also not their thing to take on.
Right. Totally. Kind of like holding that space, trying to keep that space for yourself.
Mhm.
But then additionally, like, yeah, being any sort of client facing business, it is so challenging. I mean, even like, it's not the same, but just some of the things that were coming up for me, even just being in the industry that I was with, or the exposure that I was with the migraines. Like, I knew the source, but I didn't want to speak to it always. You know what I mean? And so I just think, kind of dialing it back into having that support as you're going through that experience is so important. And when you shared that information with me, it was just one of those things where, like, again, I was already in the midst of my own personal pivot, right? Kind of silently doing my own thing behind the scenes. How do I shift my environment right now? Because, there's stimulation all around too. Like, think about the environment as a whole in the salon. Now, if you are down to go to a club and have like a bumping environment and you're like, all right, I'm going to the salon, go off, right?
Mhm.
But for someone that is navigating a diagnosis, for someone that is just going through a depressive experience, I am someone that has, dealt with depression myself. And there were times where I was just like, I physically can't work in this environment right now. There are blow dryers, there's music, there's chemicals, there's so much conversation going on. My nervous system was constantly like this, you know what I mean? And so as you're walking that path, I'm also looking at like, okay, these are the things that are coming up for me. This is the sort of reactions that I'm having to these new products that are vegan. You know what I mean? And I was like,
I can't with the vegan
I
products. I'm like, that doesn't mean it's healthy. Or they'll say like gluten free or something. I'm
right,
like,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
Like, is it really like I see it's called greenwashing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Greenwashing for people listening is basically when these companies brand stuff
Mhm.
so it looks clean, but it's
Mhm.
actually not.
Yeah.
I was actually looking at some of my body washes I got from
Mhm.
Whole Foods and it has red dye in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it says 92% clean. I'm like,
Yeah.
why'd you need red dye? Like, it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, you can go through this whole rabbit hole. I mean, it's taken me years to evolve to this point. So I don't want people stressing out about
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
unless you're like
Mhm.
really affected by it. But I think
Right.
it's important if we're dealing with clients that are chronically sick, like
Mhm.
what environments are they in? What are they
Totally.
breathing in? Like, this
Yep.
is not what we don't talk about this stuff in healthcare.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, it's like, again, when you're in a salon environment in general, it is just stimulation on at all times.
All senses are being,
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
not taste,
Yeah.
but
I mean, if
maybe
you
you're
have
like
wine,
tasting the hairspray.
I mean, honestly, yeah.
Did
There's
you
a lot of
remember
that.
after when I'd be under the hairdryer thing, you'd always get the best massages. I'm like, of the hand. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm here just for the hand massage.
Right. And so much of that, like, again, even just with like being in the hair industry and watching like over the last 15 years things evolve for me, my favorite thing in general when I was doing anything in school or, starting in my first salon, I loved the aspect of like literally caring for the person. Like I was like, I want to do an extra head massage. I want to do the things. I want to whatever. And then you get into your first salon and they tell you like, go, 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 go. You're trying to produce money for this place, right? If you're not moving fast enough, right? Well, I got into all kinds of education when I was first in the industry, and I loved that. I'm an information person. I want to do the best that I can. I don't think cosmetology teaches you much other than to pass the state boards. You know what I mean? I definitely recommend to anybody that's going that path to find a really well-suited educational experience outside of it. But being wrapped up in that environment of go, 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 you're constantly moving and you're constantly producing. There's no settling down in those moments. There was no time for me to be like, okay, well, but I want to, all right, Susan's already out of the chair. Okay, well, I want to try and slow this moment down for her for a second. I want to do the head massage. Sorry, it's taking too long. Get her in the chair. You know what I mean? And it's wild to me that so many of those aspects have been literally stripped and lost. And if you talk to anyone now, I mean, they'll still tell you, oh, my favorite part of going to the hairdresser a lot of the times is to get like the head massage. I love when they rub my
the
head.
scalp.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, it's also like, it's funny because from like a business standpoint, I can understand why people are like money, right? But I'm also like, you're using that as your only currency.
Yeah.
So let's put like, that's what they would do in like the PT world is like, let's just pump all these patients onto a new grad schedule that new grad burns out 2 years in, and then they leave. And so then think about all of that revenue loss because that person left.
Yeah.
So they're not even looking at it. If you wanted to look at it from just like a capitalistic standpoint, like you're actually doing harm because that person is going to leave. They cannot physically sustain it. They will either leave or they will get sick.
Yep.
And then at that point, you're going to have to make up for all of the people that won't come back because that person's gone, because that's going to happen. Think about all the time you're retraining somebody else.
Totally.
So that's not even from an energetic level. That's just pure like running a business, right? And so how do you feel good if your practitioners can't sit for a minute and then do what they enjoy?
Yeah.
If you feel that way, and you know, it's like, I think that's funny because it's almost like, okay, well then raise the rate like 30 extra bucks so you don't have to run around with your head cut off. Like that's what I see is like, okay, well raise your rates a little bit or maybe figure out a way that people aren't just constantly on the go. And that's what's like in the PT world. I mean, I would treat anywhere from 50 to 80 patients a week for 7 years.
Yeah.
And even now, like I'm substantially less. I treat like maybe 10 to 15 people a week while like our team is growing. So they're growing their practices more than mine because I'm running the practice. But even that, I feel this kind of like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough.
Right.
But I'm like, well, I do my podcast.
Yeah.
I'm speaking at a menopause event tonight. I'm meeting other practitioners that also feel aligned. And like, I think the important thing is if people do break out of these places or when they do, recognizing that there's a nervous system reset and you have to retrain your nervous system. Because if you don't do that, you're going to do the same shit that caused you to leave in the first place. I love it. Like people joke like, oh, work for somebody else, work 40 hours a week, work for yourself, work 24 hours a day. I don't think that's funny.
Yeah.
I don't think it's funny because it's basically just like the inner work hasn't been done to process undoing and unstripping all of those old beliefs. And that takes time to kind of sit in, do breath work, slow down, check in with your body. But if we don't do that, we just then perpetuate what caused us to burn out at the previous place in the first place. So we're actually not getting to the root.
Yeah.
And then if our nervous system's offset, we don't provide a healing environment for our clients.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, just in you speaking to that, like even the way that I run my experiences now, which I've slowed way down in the sense of the actual experience itself. I've completely
explain to people what you do.
Yeah.
Probably.
So I went from being in, I say I'm a recovering hustler because literally, we're hustling out here in these streets as a hairstylist, right? I think
Austin
that these Austin Street. I think that there's a really interesting connection between COVID when I started my business and then how I was able to operate after that. Because I started 3 weeks before the pandemic actually hit. I had no idea that this was happening in the world, and I'm glad I had my blinders on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a good chance that I may not have gone into this industry for myself or, gone into business for myself if I had known what was going on in the world. So anyways, as I, had those first 3 weeks of clients, again, I was operating exactly as I was because number one, what am I trying to do? Most of my clients were like, hell yeah, I'm coming with you. What you mean? Like, can you set me up same time, same day? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, yep. The whole thing with that is like, again, that perpetuates that same cycle that I was already living in. And at that point, I was servicing like 6 to 8 people a day. That's easily, especially for color services, 10 to 12 hours. You know what I mean? With a few sprinkled haircuts in there. And, you know, on my max days, there's 12 people. Imagine how long that, you know, it's like those days in general. So I already knew going into my own space, I was like, I got to cut this down a little bit. I don't know how, but that's where this COVID blessing came in, right? Because 3 weeks I worked exactly the same way that I did prior. And additionally, during that time, I also like to say I was learning a new language because I went completely shifted everything on its head and said, I'm going to bring in completely new products. I'm going to go the more holistic route. I'm not going to bring in any Redken, any Pureology, any of the stuff that was breaking me out, because why? You know what I mean? And I communicated that with my guests. I was like, look, we're going to be in a period of question mark. You know what I mean? Like, when I do your color, I'm going to need the feedback as to like, was this okay? How was the coverage? All of the things. But during that time, to learn a new language as somebody sitting in your chair, like to look at these boxes and be like, yep, this looks about right. You know what I mean? And to try and say like, okay, well, we're just going to see what happens. It's an experiment, you know? And that was stressful too, you know, to even be by myself. I'm not running anything by anybody, but it was a level of trust that I knew what I was doing. You know, I was able to learn those things, but then coming back from those 9 weeks off, I got to sit, I got to learn about scalp care. I got to learn about all these things that have been like really like kind of sprinkling little.
It's those little whispers.
Yeah. It's one of those things where like anytime I was doing color and somebody had like flaky scalp, irritated scalp, red scalp, whatever, I'd be like, hey, what's going on? We're using a detox shampoo. What's happening? You know what I mean? Because like science side of me loves that, loves scalp education. So essentially I was able to learn the foundation of all of that scalp education through the product line that I had invested in, which was beautiful. During the pandemic, they were giving a lot of free education because everybody was just like chronically online, right? So I was like, yeah, let's go ahead. So I was learning a lot from different countries, which was incredible. But then that like, you know, sparkle whisper of like, oh, this is what I want to do. I was also like, I'm going to have to figure out how to hold this space and what I was doing with color, hair cutting, highlighting, all of that. And then also try and work in scalp care when we're going to come back from the pandemic and we're not even going to know how to hold space. Like, we're not even going to know how to be together, you know, like, and I'm going to be suited up in something that I've never worked in before. And I run hot, baby. You know what I mean? So I literally was like, okay, let's just see what happens. And what it did is it allowed me to space out my day. So I'd have a client, I'd have a minimum of 30 minutes in between each client so that I could go through the proper sanitation protocols, do the things that I needed to do. Because again, even at the time, the conversation online, at least in our industry, was like, you may not be able to use your blow dryers because if somebody has COVID, you're masked up, you've got your like shield on, all the things, but you're blowing around.
God, they were coming at hairdressers so hard during COVID.
Yeah. So it was like, oh, well, if you're using a blow dryer during, you know, this, you know, devastating time of COVID, then, you know, you shouldn't even have your license at this point. And it's like, well, what are we to do? You know what? We're just trying our best, you know? So I ultimately, once I got used to this schedule of like having a client, having this break, number one, I mean, we don't even talk about the exacerbated eating disorders that happen being a hairstylist because you go into a business that allows you no breaks, no water, no bathroom, no full meals.
Literally, it's like that in PT too.
Yeah.
It's like that in healthcare.
Yes. So it's one of those things where I was like, hold on. So all of a sudden me having this space, yes, I was detoxing my space and all of that. But at the same time too, I was like, hold on, I got a second to like eat my food. I got a second to like go to the bathroom. And then all these like, it started clicking in, right? Which then has now progressed me to this place of, you know, I loved doing hair color and I deeply enjoyed the artistic side of it. However, 3 years into me using those holistic products, I started feeling very similar symptoms to what I was experiencing when I left Redken and the salon space. So that was devastating for me because I love connecting with my clients in that way. That meant someone like you who is still continuing to get their hair color touched up, you know, grays, blended, whatever the case may be. I had to say, now I have to completely shift and invite you to see someone else.
No, for me, it was almost like at perfect timing because I was like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
You know, and I could see you struggling. You'd be like, I can still do it. And I was like, don't worry. Like, honestly, I don't even want to do it anyway. Like, why am I even doing it? It's so funny how energetically we've been on these like similar paths with it. But and even just seeing what you're about to go into with the head spa. Carrie, keep going.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately with that, like, again, it feels like a devastating loss when you have to release these clients that have been through it with you. Like, at that point, it had been
It's great.
7, 8 years of me being able to sit with these people, laugh with these. I call you all my family, you know what I mean? Because I went into business for myself and you all showed up for me. And that was just like, in a time where the world was just a huge ass question mark, that was so supportive and so healing for me. And then also just like a wild ride, you know?
But you always had this like thing about you that you're just like you like knew what you were doing and everything was like gonna work out.
I think that's just like the undertone of number one. I will say a lot of that foundation that I found in those first couple years of going into the industry, that was like, you know, the education I got there, I will always say that I'm so grateful for. Even though it took me out as like a 19 to 21-year-old person, it was one of those things where I was working that hard. I was being witnessed by people that were platform artists that taught other stylists at big, huge events. And I just was like, you know, it was a blessing to have that work and that education the way that I did. And I also understand now looking back in a lot of ways how I would do things differently if I was put in that position for a young person. You know what I mean? Because again, you're setting up the expectation that like you're going to hustle, you're going to do this, you know, we're going to continue to watch you as you continue to fall. We're going to, you know, help support you, but we're also going to put you back in your place. You know what I mean? Because we want the best for you, but it is a rigid experience, you know? So when I came here to Austin and like people wanted to like look at you in the face, because again, Maryland, I'm close to, you know, it's like going to New York City. Right? It's one of those things where I'm like, I'm close enough to Baltimore that it's like, no, we ain't hugging each other. We ain't looking at each other in the eye. Like, I love you from afar, but happy to do your service. See you later. Right?
Yeah.
Even though there's like this beautiful Cancerian energy in there with me, coming to Austin was a huge culture shock because I was watching people like slow things down, even though we're a melting pot of all kinds of different people. It was a completely different environment going into a salon and seeing my coworkers like hug their clients goodbye. I was like, oh, is that your husband? She's like, no, it's my client. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, interesting.
Is that child?
Yeah, right. Oh, got it. So it's like this like new experience kind of coming into this like level of care,
Yeah.
you know? But yeah.
But dive into your experience from the head spa industry because you've really been a pioneer in that. And I think that it's good for people to hear and understand how scalp and the fascia around the scalp and how that affects health.
Yeah.
And so if you want to kind of dive in a little bit to that, because we don't look at the scalp much as practitioners. I mean, we look at it, we're starting to look at it more, but it's still like if you look at the fascial components, how the scalp like fascia connects all the way down
Oh, yeah.
to even the feet.
Yes.
And so explain a little bit about like some things that, you know, just a little bit about scalp health.
Yeah. So as I transitioned into scalp health, the biggest and nerdiest part of me is the fact that I get to look at your scalp under a microscope. And with that, it's being able to, you know, I never say diagnose, you're just looking at what the current environment of the scalp is. So being able to assess, like, is it dandruff? Is it dry scalp? Is it, you know, over oily or production of oils on your scalp? Have we been taught proper ways of shampooing our hair? And this is where I will come in and say that shampooing and connecting with our scalp in general is the best foundational experience we can have because none of us were ever properly taught these things.
No.
We see our hair, but we don't see our scalp. Whether we are going through the process of, you know, regrowing our hair, cutting our hair, whatever the case, it's always been about the hair, but it's never been about like where has the hair come from, right? So
Totally, no.
when I think about, you know, being able to see these things under the microscope, that's so cool and that's so like illuminating. But the first thing I'll tell people is you're going to do yourself a disservice if you're not connecting with your scalp on a daily basis, right? And especially for someone that's going through any sort of hair depletion. That could be from a diagnosis, that could be from, an
Autoimmune's a
autoimmune,
big
that could
one.
be anything. And so I tell people connecting with your scalp, because you may think like, oh, but I'm losing my hair. I'm afraid that I'm going to pull more out. If you are not activating blood flow and getting that oxygen to the scalp to really support those capillaries to help rebuild those hair strands, we're going to fall flat. And it's just not, it's the ability to be able to like replenish that environment on a daily basis that helps catapult you into like hair growth and a healthy environment.
It's wild because like when did you do my hair? Like 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
My hair was falling out. Like I kept like I've gone to the point where I wash every other day or so. But every time I'd wash, it would just start like coming out. Like I was like, oh my gosh, like that's weird. Like there's a lot of clumps. And then I immediately when you lose hair, people are like, oh my God, it's autoimmune or this or this, this.
Yeah.
But I think it's super important too because I'm in perimenopause. Anytime there's hair loss, it is a little triggering because it reminds me of chemo.
Totally.
But I have not had that since our treatment. And I think from a practitioner standpoint, I think it's super great to just like tell our clients like, okay, well, is the scalp, like, are you massaging your scalp? Or like, what are some things when you say like connecting with your scalp? What does that mean?
Yeah. So I really like to try and support a ritual at home that feels doable for you, right? Because not everybody's going to have what I do, which is almost 2 hours of scalp massage a day, because I'm serious. You know what I mean? Like there is now education out there that is supportive of our epigenetics, genes, all of that, that quite literally, if you are massaging your scalp on a daily basis for up to 2 hours a day, then yes, that is going to absolutely break down this or turn off and on this epigenetic coding, right, that we each have to say like, oh, we get to produce more hair. But we have to have that blood flow. We have to have those things, right? So, sorry, now I forgot your question.
Oh, just so massaging the scalp.
Yes.
I mean, I'm going to tell you,
Yeah.
I don't massage my scalp
No.
2 hours
No.
a day.
And that's,
but
yeah. So
but
that's where
I
I'll say, like, just in general, creating a ritual that feels easy for you.
Yeah.
When I tell people in general, because we're not again, we're not connecting with our scalp on a daily basis.
No,
I have
we've
this.
never talked.
Yeah.
Like literally, it's never talked about.
Yeah, I've talked about this for myself and I've done this for myself and I've gone through these rituals and I've been like, okay, we have to start with something before we just blast off into, the most effective ways, right? So I typically tell people at the end of the night, whether it is a silicone little scrubby brush that you have, right? Keeping that baby clean if you're touching it with your scalp. A lot of people are using that in the shower. I always say, rip that baby out of the shower, keep it out of the shower and like use it as your scalp tool for your massage. Because a lot of times, again, the pressure on that you can get, it invigorates a little bit more blood flow, sometimes even more than our fingers can. So using a tool can be really helpful, but it could be for up to like, maybe you're doing it for 2 minutes starting out.
But it's
maybe you're
still
just like,
something.
it's
Or
something.
even as they wash their hair. Like, what was that thing you said? You said
Yes.
to kind of get in, like once when you're shampooing, kind of part it, scrub it, and then you're
Yes.
getting like the different layers of it too.
Yeah.
So you're not just like washing your hair, you're like scrubbing your scalp in lines.
Yes, exactly. So, for the foundation of actually washing your hair, so many of us, yes, have been washing our hair because we put our products on our head and we're like moving it around the hair. But I'm like, is that suds, is that emulsification actually happening at the scalp, right? Because someone will come in and I'll look at their scalp under the microscope and they'll say they washed yesterday and there will be still so much stuff that's just hanging out, whether that's like buildup, debris, whatever, dead skin cells, you know what I mean? And a lot of times it's because you've got thick hair. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, so much
It's
hair.
one of those things where like when somebody has thick hair even too, it's parting it down the middle, really opening that hair up, allowing it to get waterlogged, like super dense with water. Because again, when we get in the shower, we are thinking about everything else except being in the shower. We are like, oh, what do I have to do outside of the shower when I get out of here, right? This is where we slow down the ritual to really be able to just like spend that moment of self-care for yourself. Do something more intentionally with your scalp that'll help promote more blood flow, hair growth, all of it. But then also you're setting yourself up, because if you are cleaning it properly, a lot of times that, people that are washing every single day, it's because a lot of times they're just not cleaning properly,
Well, what explain why, like, because you were
Mhm,
saying all this stuff for scalp health, and I
mhm,
go, okay, but
mhm.
what's like the real like, give me like, why should I care about it? That's kind of what I said. You were
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
well,
yeah.
basically, it helps with hair loss.
Yeah. Yep.
And so if we have clients with perimenopause or hormone changes or things like that,
Mhm.
and that's a big concern that they're having,
Yeah.
even just getting them to start connecting like with their scalp,
Mhm.
massaging it and
Mhm.
understanding. But why, like, because when you did mine, we saw like
Mhm.
the debris at the root.
Mhm.
Why is it that, like, why does that affect
Hair growth.
hair loss? Like, because
Yeah.
it's already there and there's
Mhm.
just clumps around it
Mhm.
and it's just kind of hanging out at the root.
Mhm.
Why does that, why does cleaning that out change hair loss?
Yeah. So ultimately, we've already talked about blood flow. Cool.
Yeah.
That's really supportive. But when you have
Mhm.
a scalp environment that is either full of what can be even our water source, right? Our water source is not clean and pure here in Austin. We've got chemicals, minerals, deposits, prescriptions, all kinds of stuff in our water, right? And then you get to a place where that is kind of harboring on the scalp, because a lot of us air dry. So I
Mhm.
always tell people, if you can just bring that blow dryer in those first 10 minutes just to blast that water source out, that will help with like releasing a film that can also start to suffocate the scalp, right? I always
Mhm.
say this is a humid environment up here. You get out of the shower, it's a humid environment. What is that a breeding ground for? Bacteria. A lot of us are sleeping with our hair wet, right? So when that stuff lays, right? And then you
I was like yawning. My dog.
He's my sweet angel. When you have that area that's already kind of, being impacted by just a water
It's like
source,
getting
right?
moldy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeast, fungal infections, all of that
I'm
can
like
happen.
scratching
Yeah,
my, I'm like, do I have
literally.
yeast
Yeah.
infection? Do I have a yeast infection on my scalp?
No, we just looked. You're good.
She's like, no, it's
You're
just my
Gucci. Yeah.
vagina.
So ultimately, when you come into, contact with that water source, you're blow drying that out, you're helping support that environment.
Yeah.
But when those oils come in, and this is what was happening for you personally, is your oils were naturally coming out of the hair follicle. And I always say a lot of times that oil wants to go up the hair strand and it wants to nourish and replenish the scalp. But if that film is present the way that it typically is, then those oils can't penetrate that film and it starts building around the hair base. When
That's
those
why my hair
oils
felt really dry.
Yeah, well, it also felt just a little bit built up and we had those little like
Yeah.
flakies that you could see, right? So
Yeah.
it was oil that had dried down. So you didn't
Mhm.
have dry scalp, you didn't have dandruff because it hadn't, progressed to a fungal infection. It
Yeah.
quite literally had just been old oils that you
Yeah.
weren't getting to, right?
Yeah.
And so keeping a clear environment helps support hair growth, because when those oils come up and then they harbor around the hair base and it dries down, that can not only impact the actual like quickness that the hair grows, right? Because it's creating like a speed bump. You know what I mean? So that hair is trying to grow, but that like waxiness of your oils have
It's
already
like an
built this
ingrown hair
structure.
kind of
It
thing.
is, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's how we end up with things like folliculitis of the scalp and all of that. Because again, it's like, it's just not being cleaned properly.
Yeah.
So when I look at like the best scenario for most people, right? I mean, yes, I service most people here in Austin, but I've traveled all over the place and seen, scalps elsewhere. And a lot of us, again, it's just the foundation of being able to clean your scalp at a very like foundational level, getting to your actual scalp rather than cleaning just your hair. And oils help with that too. So a lot of times people will be like, well, I use this shampoo, I use detox shampoo all the time. I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. And, they think they have all the right tools. And typically they have all the right things. It's just
Yeah.
how you're using them. So when I explain the basic science of our scalp health in general, natural scalp oils that we can use to replenish and keep a rebalanced and hydrated environment, it's going to be that we're using the scalp oils, putting that on our scalp, massaging our scalp, because like attracts like. Your natural oils up here that are kind of hanging out, that are older, that we can't see, that you're like, oh yeah, if I itch my scalp, I can kind of feel that like waxiness on my fingers.
Yeah.
If you're using a scalp oil,
Yeah.
yeah, you're literally getting in there and allowing that stuff to kind of melt down and then you get in the shower and you're able to wash that out a little bit more effectively. But that's where I'll tell people to follow up with a double cleansing, because when you use oil, again, water and oil has never mixed. You know what I mean? So when you get in the shower and you're using something that emulsifies, you just have to be more intentional about how you're washing, which is why I was talking to you about splitting your hair down the middle, really emulsifying the product in your hand, applying it with your palm rather than your fingers, because this is such a small little surface area.
Oh, I
Your
thought, but
palm.
that's how I would get in there and scrub it off.
Yeah, so,
But
well,
you're saying like the whole
yeah. So if you were to,
whole
yep,
hand.
exactly.
Okay.
Now, that's not necessarily for the scrubbing process. That's just like applying your product, right? So if you're massaging
Oh.
that and you're getting it to a place of lather, right? This area is bigger than this area,
Yeah.
right? So you're just like parting your hair, and then you're placing your palm kind of down that parting so it gets to the root, right?
Yeah.
And or the scalp, and then you can get in there with your fingers and start moving things around. But I always say add more water before adding more product, so that way you can actually see that like emulsification happening. But when you're working with oils, know that that first shampoo is going to be really, really important to just at least try and move that stuff out of there to clear the path. And then that second shampoo will actually like feel like you lathered and you're like, okay, cool, now I'm Gucci and I feel really nice and clean. But a clean environment is always going to help support hair growth so much more than if you were to think, think about a garden, right? We're like planting these beautiful seeds and we're like, okay, cool, I'm going to create this fabulous nutrient-rich soil. And then all of a sudden you come out there and you're like, never mind, I'm going to put pesticides, aka dry shampoo. You know what I mean? I'm going to, layer it with
I
this.
use dry shampoo though.
Yeah, and you can. It's just a matter of
Mine's
knowing
more
how
the
to
natural
Yes.
stuff though. I don't.
So like a powder.
Yeah.
So powder dry shampoo, always superior to an aerosol dry
Okay.
shampoo. Just because people out there, if you're using an aerosol dry shampoo, the first thing I want you to run and look at is if it has butane, because butane is a known carcinogen and it's the number one ingredient in a dry shampoo aerosol. And it's typically the first ingredient. And we know the potency of when it is the first ingredient. That can be really, really, what we were talking about earlier. It can be really
it's like,
disruptive to our health.
well, it's like a balance, because it's like I think when people are first going on this journey, like I threw out everything and then I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I just ease into it first and work on nervous system, and then just starting being aware of like your body and the signals that's coming from it. And then slowly evolving. But I think it's important that we're bringing awareness to it so that when people are ready to make the change, because maybe they're noticing it in their health, then they have that resources. So basically, a lot of it is massaging the scalp regularly, like when you're washing your hair, get in between, get to the scalp, fold your hair, go along that line. Scalp oils and blow drying your hair after, so it's not just like mildewing, yeasty environment.
And I just tell people with the blow dryer, like, again, we've been taught for the last 15 to 20 years that heat is bad, don't use heat, all of those things. And what I want to say to you, because a lot of people will be like, oh, homework? No, because we all have our own relationship with the blow dryer and it's not always super fun, So I always say if you can get in there for like 5 to 7 minutes and just blast dry the scalp, that is going to be so supportive. You don't have to do your whole head. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
you don't have to go through your whole entire,
yeah.
scalp to ends. But as long as you can get in there and just release your scalp of the moisture, that will be so important and so supportive.
I've started doing that the second. So just like folding it and then just getting to the scalp. It also is better because when you sleep, I can like visualize now. Like after you said that, I was like, I'm like visualizing just like this. Like, what other part of us would we just let hang out being moist?
I know.
The product, like we don't do that.
I know. It's because we can't see it.
I also kind of think that about like the vagina too.
Yeah.
Like we wear like tight pants all day.
Yeah.
And just like sitting in that, like I'm happy that things are moving now where we're not wearing like these tight clothes all the time. And I'm like, oh, I bet
we can breathe.
Yeah, I know. Vaginas are happy everywhere.
I know.
But
we just need good materials for them too,
I know.
That's a whole nother thing.
We could talk about that another time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I feel like we could talk for hours.
Oh, no, we could. We literally could. Yeah. And I will say, I'll just like plug my resources so that way.
Yeah.
If anybody out there,
how can they find you?
So essentially, yes, I'm here in Austin, Texas. I offer these really beautiful head spa experiences. I like to kind of call it this balance of education and Zen time. But if you are not local and, you are just looking to support your scalp from home and you're like, she was talking a lot about foundation and this, that, and the other, but you don't know where to start. It is quite literally a guide that I have already created in microfilms that walks you through, how to prep your scalp before you get in the shower, how to scalp oil, why scalp oiling is important, who it's important for, how to waterlog, how to detox your hair, what detox shampoo to choose. If you're kind of in that like shift of trying to figure out, I want to explore the non-tox and or low tox route, but I don't know where to go. This is for you for those resources because, again, I was just seeing such a hole when I would send people home after these beautiful experiences. And then I had to think about myself as a consumer because I go and have my skin done and I have a lot of questions after that. And so I was like, how can I support people from home as a follow-up or somebody that's just curious about building a better ritual for themselves in general? So that will go through all of those things. The blow drying is in there, the importance of all of that. So a lot of what we already spoke to is in an online resource. It's called How to Unfunk Your Scalp, so that way you can feel really confident at home.
What's your website that they can find?
My website is GEMPIRE HairCo.
You forgot for a sec.
Yeah, because I was like, is it my email? Hold on, what is my email?
And then your
GEMPIRE
Instagram, GEMPIRE?
Yeah, GEMPIRE_head spa.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing this beautiful angel with me. It was a lovely, lovely
She's
time.
great for the nervous system.
Yeah, we could have one monthly. We could talk about so many things. I feel like we just cracked the surface.
I know. But I'm excited that we talked about the scalp stuff at the end.
Yeah,
I think people can relate.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. It would be a huge help if you could subscribe and rate the podcast. It helps us reach more people and make a bigger impact. I would also love it if you could join my email list, which is linked in the caption, for podcast updates, upcoming offers, and events. You can also find me on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram at drmarypt. Thanks again.